Olivia Cheng was 17 when she vanished into the dense wilderness of Yosemite National Park. It was early spring of 2015, and her high school had organized an annual hiking trip, a rite of passage for many students, a chance to connect with nature and test their limits. Olivia, always adventurous and determined, had eagerly signed up. The morning started bright and clear. The group of 20 teenagers, led by 2 seasoned park rangers and their science teacher, trekked along the well-worn trails that twisted through towering pines and granite cliffs. Olivia walked near the front, her camera swinging from her neck, as she snapped pictures of blooming wildflowers and distant mountain peaks. But by midday, the sky began to shift. Clouds rolled in faster than anyone expected, thickening and darkening with an ominous weight. The wind picked up, rattling the branches and sending a chill through the hikers. The group quickened their pace, hoping to reach the camp before the storm broke. Olivia, caught in the moment, was distracted by a patch of unusual mushrooms she spotted off the trail. Without thinking, she veered slightly into the underbrush, stepping quietly but quickly to investigate. The thunder grumbled overhead and raindrops began to fall, but she was focused on capturing a perfect close-up shot. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed nearby, the unmistakable sound of a falling tree limb. Olivia startled, and in her rush to move back toward the path, she lost sight of the main trail. The rain intensified, and visibility dropped as a thick fog crept in. Panic flickered in her chest. She called out, but the storm swallowed her voice. The group, now far ahead, didn't hear her. Olivia's footsteps splashed through puddles as she scrambled over roots and rocks, trying to retrace her steps. Her heart pounded. Branches scraped her arms. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the storm eased, and a heavy silence settled. Minutes passed, but the trail was nowhere to be found. Frustrated, Olivia pressed onward, hoping to find any sign of the others. Her phone had no signal. The sun dipped low behind the peaks, casting long shadows over the forest floor. Hours later, when the group realized Olivia was missing, a search party was immediately dispatched. Flashlights and radios were distributed. Worried voices pierced the night air. Searchers combed the surrounding area, calling her name into the darkness. They found something, a trail of footprints, clear and fresh, pressed into the soft earth. At first, hope surged. The footprints led steadily away from the main trail, weaving deeper into the woods. Then, inexplicably, the footprints stopped. No further trace. No sign of struggle, no dropped belongings, no cries for help, just silence. Days stretched into a week. Helicopters scanned the treetops. Divers scoured nearby streams and lakes. But Olivia Cheng was gone. Her family held on to hope, releasing flyers pleading for information. The park remained open, but a shadow lingered in the air, a reminder that even in one of America's most beautiful places, the wilderness could swallow a person whole, leaving nothing behind but questions. 8 years would pass before anyone would come close to uncovering the truth hidden beneath Yosemite's ancient trees. The news of Olivia Cheng's disappearance spread quickly through the small town near Yosemite, stirring a mix of fear, curiosity, and sympathy. The media covered every detail they could find. The last known moments, the halted footprints, the desperate search efforts, but answers were scarce. Locals and park officials offered their theories, each one more unsettling than the last. Some believed Olivia had fallen victim to the park's natural dangers, steep cliffs, swift rivers, or wild animals lurking unseen. Yosemite's beautiful, but it's unforgiving, one ranger told a reporter. You can get lost in a blink, and the forest hides its secrets well. Others whispered darker possibilities. There were rumors of poachers and illegal hunters operating in remote parts of the park, some willing to do anything to avoid detection. A few suggested a stranger had taken Olivia, a chilling thought that gripped her family tighter than any natural threat. At the school, Olivia's classmates were shattered. Many had hiked alongside her, shared laughs and stories during breaks. Sarah Martinez, her closest friend, remembered the last day vividly. We got caught in that storm, and Olivia just disappeared. It was like she vanished into thin air, she said quietly. I keep wondering if I could have done something to stop it. Teachers and counselors held group meetings, trying to help students process the trauma. Some refused to talk about the incident at all, unwilling to face the horror of an unanswered disappearance. The park rangers who led the trip faced intense scrutiny. Had they properly accounted for every student? Was the route safe during unpredictable weather? Their reports insisted they followed all safety protocols, but guilt lingered. Meanwhile, the official investigation proceeded cautiously. Search teams continued patrols along the edges of the last known location. They examined every inch of the terrain, fallen logs, hidden caves, shallow ravines, but nothing new emerged. Olivia's parents clung to any clue, no matter how small. They organized private search parties, hired trackers, even consulted psychics. Each lead ended in dead ends, driving their hope deeper underground. One surprising breakthrough came when a seasoned tracker named Mark Daniels volunteered to join the effort. His eyes scanned the forest floor with sharp precision, noting subtle signs others had missed. Mark found something strange. Faint markings on several trees near the edge of the halted footprints. They resembled symbols carved by a knife, but their meaning was unclear. Could be old hunting signs or something else, he said cautiously. The park's historian suggested these markings might be linked to Native American legends about forest spirits protecting sacred ground. The thought unsettled many, blurring the line between fact and folklore. As the weeks turned into months, the official search wound down, but the mystery of Olivia's disappearance deepened. Her story became part of Yosemite's whispered lore, a warning to visitors and a heartbreak for those who knew her. Campfires echoed with tales of a girl lost to the forest, the footprints that stopped, and something that might still be listening in the shadows. 8 years later, the mystery would finally stir again, when a group of park rangers stumbled upon a forgotten hunter's cabin, sealed and hidden deep in a prohibited zone of the park. Inside, buried beneath the floorboards, they would find a journal that chilled them to the bone. Years passed, and Olivia Cheng's disappearance slowly slipped from the headlines, buried beneath newer stories and changing seasons. Yet for her family and a handful of loyal friends, the pain never faded. Each anniversary reopened old wounds, and every unexplained noise in the night sparked a new hope or dread. The park itself remained a place of beauty and danger, attracting visitors eager to hike, camp, and explore. But behind the postcard perfect views, an undercurrent of unease lingered, especially among the rangers who had been part of the search. Most had tried to move on, but a few couldn't shake the feeling that something had been overlooked. There were odd reports, strange sounds deep in the forest, unexplained shadows seen from the corner of the eye, the occasional misplaced item left on trails. None of these incidents were officially recorded, dismissed as tricks of the mind or nature's quirks. Among the rangers was a man named Carl Jensen. He had led the initial search parties and was haunted by the footprints that stopped so abruptly. Carl believed Olivia hadn't just wandered off or fallen. Something else had intervened. We looked everywhere, but it was like the forest swallowed her whole, he would say in quiet moments. Those prints, they don't end naturally. They just stop. Carl spent his free time studying the park's lesser-known areas, trying to understand what might hide in the dense wilderness. He pored over old maps, historical accounts, and even Native American folklore, looking for clues that might explain the mystery. Meanwhile, Olivia's parents had moved away, hoping distance would dull the ache, but they kept in touch with the small community that remembered their daughter, and every once in a while, a new piece of information would surface. A hiker's odd encounter, a strange pattern on a trail camera, a whisper from a local hunter. One such whisper spoke of a secluded hunter's cabin, rumored to be off limits and forgotten by most. The cabin was said to lie deep within a prohibited zone, an area the park strictly enforced as off limits due to dangerous terrain and fragile ecosystems. For years, no one ventured there, until a routine patrol 8 years after Olivia's disappearance. A group of park rangers, including Carl Jensen, was conducting a survey of the remote regions of Yosemite. Their task was to check on trail conditions and ensure no unauthorized activity disturbed the wilderness. While trekking through thick brush and rugged slopes, they stumbled upon something unusual. A weathered, moss-covered cabin nestled in a small clearing. The structure looked abandoned, almost hidden by time and nature's reclamation. The cabin's windows were boarded up, the door sealed shut with heavy planks. Signs warned against entry, citing hazardous conditions. But curiosity and duty compelled the rangers to investigate further. After securing permission from park authorities, the team pried open the door and stepped inside. What they found was unlike anything they expected. The interior was sparse but orderly. Tools hung on walls, a rusty stove sat cold in the corner, and a thin layer of dust covered old furniture. The air smelled of damp wood and earth. Beneath the floorboards, something caught their eye. A loose plank, carefully lifted to reveal a small hidden compartment. Inside lay a worn, leather-bound journal. Its pages were yellowed with age, edges frayed, ink faded but still legible. The rangers exchanged uneasy glances. This journal, they realized, could be the key to unlocking the truth behind Olivia Cheng's disappearance. As they flipped through the pages, a chilling message stood out among the faded words. "It doesn't walk at night. It listens. I made too much noise." The journal felt heavy in Ranger Carl Jensen's hands, as if it carried the weight of years of silence and fear. The cramped handwriting was uneven, written in hurried bursts as though the author was racing against something unseen and relentless. The group carefully examined the cabin, now more aware that this place held answers long buried beneath the forest floor. The first few pages of the journal introduced its owner, a hunter named Thomas Avery, who had lived in the cabin years before anyone had heard of Olivia Cheng. Thomas wrote of solitude, of the peace found in the wilderness, but also of an uneasy feeling growing in the woods around him. He described strange noises at night, whispers carried by the wind, rustling leaves where no animal should be. His entries grew darker over time, filled with paranoia and dread. "Something watches beyond the trees," one entry read. "Not an animal, but not quite human either. I thought it was a trick of the mind at first, but last night it came close." The rangers shared uneasy looks. Could Thomas Avery's words be connected to Olivia's disappearance? Was this something still out there? Further reading revealed that Thomas had tried to protect himself. He had set traps, built barricades, and kept a strict routine of silence after dark. "I learned it doesn't walk at night," he wrote, "but it listens. Any sound draws its attention. I made too much noise." The journal's last entries were frantic, describing a confrontation that was never detailed, but hinted at something terrifying closing in on him. The rangers debated their next steps. Should they report this immediately? Should they search the surrounding woods for more clues? Carl felt a chill as he recalled the stopped footprints in Olivia's case. The sudden silence, the absence of struggle. Could both Olivia and Thomas have encountered the same presence? Later that evening, the team camped near the cabin. As darkness fell, the forest around them seemed to hold its breath. The familiar sounds of wildlife faded, replaced by an oppressive stillness. A low rustle came from the tree line. A twig snapped, eyes darted nervously toward the shadows. For a moment, no one moved. Then, distant and faint, a whisper floated on the wind. The journal had warned them. It didn't walk at night. It listened. The night around the cabin was unlike any the Rangers had ever experienced. The usual symphony of crickets, owls, and rustling leaves was gone, replaced by an eerie, suffocating silence that seemed to press in from all sides. Carl Jensen sat by the small campfire, the flickering flames casting long shadows on the rough-hewn walls of the cabin. The journal lay open on his lap, its fragile pages whispering secrets of fear and solitude. The other Rangers kept close, their eyes scanning the darkness beyond the firelight, fingers never far from their radios or flashlights. They had all felt it. The unmistakable sensation of being watched, though no one could say from where. Suddenly, a faint sound broke the silence. A soft crackling, like footsteps on dry leaves, but irregular and distant. The Rangers froze, straining to listen. "Did you hear that?" whispered one. Carl nodded slowly. "It's out there." Minutes passed. The sound came and went, never close enough to pinpoint, but persistent. Every rustle, every snap of a twig set nerves on edge. "Remember what the journal said?" Carl murmured. "It doesn't walk at night. It listens." "But if it's not moving, how do we know it's close?" Another ranger asked, voice tight. "No movement doesn't mean no presence," Carl replied grimly. "It's watching, waiting." The fire dwindled, casting the group into deeper darkness. Then, just beyond the tree line, a faint glow appeared, small, flickering, like a candle flame. "Is someone out there?" one ranger whispered, reaching for his flashlight. Before anyone could react, a sharp, chilling scream pierced the night, a sound filled with panic and pain, echoing through the trees and freezing the blood in their veins. The Rangers jumped to their feet, shining their beams toward the source, but found nothing. Only the empty forest stared back. "Stay together," Carl ordered. "We're not leaving this clearing." For hours the sounds continued, whispers, footsteps, distant cries, but no sign of any living creature. The tension grew unbearable. Carl's thoughts raced back to the halted footprints, the silent cabin, and the desperate entries in the journal. Whatever had taken Olivia, whatever haunted this forest, was still here. As dawn broke, the eerie noises faded with the night. The Rangers packed their gear in silence, their minds heavy with questions. They had uncovered a secret that went beyond a simple disappearance, a darkness that refused to be named. And deep in the woods, beneath layers of earth and time, the cabin waited, holding the final pages of a story yet to be told. Back at the ranger station, Carl spread the journal's pages across the table under bright fluorescent lights. Every word, every scribble seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The cabin and its chilling warnings had shaken the entire team, but it was the journal's final entry that gripped Carl most tightly. He read it aloud, voice steady but tense. "It doesn't walk at night. It listens. I made too much noise." The words echoed in the room, a haunting refrain that refused to let go. Determined to uncover the truth, Carl began piecing together the timeline of Thomas Avery's last days. The journal entries became increasingly erratic, the neat script dissolving into frantic scrawls. Thomas wrote of shadows that stretched and moved just beyond the edge of his sight, of moments when the forest itself seemed to breathe. One entry caught Carl's eye. "I think it knows I'm here. I hear it behind the walls, waiting for silence. I can't leave the cabin. If I do, it will find me. But staying means waiting." Carl imagined the isolation Thomas must have felt, trapped in the cabin with something unseen, something patient and deadly. The journal hinted at a confrontation but gave no details. There was no sign of what happened after that last entry. Carl shared his findings with the rest of the ranger team. Opinions varied. Some wanted to dismiss the journal as the paranoid ramblings of a solitary hunter. Others felt a deeper fear, a chilling awareness that something beyond explanation had invaded their forest. Meanwhile, local historians were consulted. They spoke of old legends, stories of guardians or spirits protecting sacred lands, punishing those who disturbed the balance. Could Thomas Avery's "it" be one of these ancient forces? Carl wasn't sure, but the connection to Olivia's disappearance was impossible to ignore. Both had vanished near the same remote area. Both seemed to have encountered a presence that didn't hunt, but listened. As the days passed, Carl found himself haunted by the journal's warnings. He replayed the strange sounds they had heard outside the cabin, the flicker of the distant glow, the blood-curdling scream that had shattered the night. Most unsettling was the knowledge that if this entity really listened, then any noise, any careless step or word could draw it closer. Carl resolved to return to the cabin, better prepared and with a plan to document everything. He wanted to find out what had happened to Thomas Avery and perhaps, finally, to Olivia Cheng. But as he prepared his gear, a shadow loomed over him, not in the forest, but in his own mind. The sense that some secrets were meant to stay buried, and that the price of discovery could be far greater than anyone imagined. Carl Jensen returned to the secluded hunter's cabin with a small team, equipped with cameras, audio recorders, and emergency supplies. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the jagged peaks of Yosemite, casting long shadows through the dense trees. The forest seemed quieter than before, as if it were holding its breath in anticipation. Inside the cabin, the team carefully documented every detail. The journal was placed in a protective case, but Carl kept a copy with him. The atmosphere was heavy with unease. That night, as the team settled in, strange things began to happen. The radio crackled with static, and sometimes faint voices whispered through the speakers, words that no one could quite make out. The campfire flickered despite the absence of wind. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and stretching unnaturally. Carl felt a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, the sense that unseen eyes were watching from just beyond the firelight. Around midnight, A soft tapping began at the cabin's window. One by one, the rangers turned toward the sound. No one saw anything outside, only the rustling branches and the moonlight filtering through the leaves. The tapping grew louder, insistent, rhythmic. Suddenly, the cabin door slammed shut, as if slammed by an invisible hand. Panic flared. Radios buzzed frantically as the team tried to communicate, but signals cut in and out. The temperature seemed to drop sharply, breath turning to mist in the freezing air. Carl's heart pounded as he remembered Thomas Avery's last words. "It doesn't walk at night. It listens." But if it didn't move, then how was it making these sounds? Was it warning them or toying with them? Desperately, Carl grabbed a flashlight and moved to the door, trying to pry it open. It held firm. Voices echoed faintly from the woods, a mixture of pleading, warning, and something older, darker. Then, through the thin walls, Carl heard a whisper, barely audible. "Too much noise." Suddenly, the tapping stopped. The temperature rose. The door creaked open slowly. The rangers spilled outside, scanning the dark forest. No figure was there. No footprints or signs of passage. Only silence. Exhausted and shaken, they decided to pack up at first light. As dawn broke, Carl gazed once more at the cabin. The journal's chilling warning echoed louder than ever. Somewhere deep in these woods, something ancient and watchful still lingered, and it had been listening. The rangers left the cabin behind as the morning sun spilled over Yosemite's towering cliffs, but the feeling of being watched didn't fade. Carl Jensen's mind was restless, haunted by the whispers and the slam of the cabin door. Back at the ranger station, the audio recordings from the night were played over and over. Between the crackles of static, faint voices seemed to emerge. Pleas, warnings, and something indecipherable, almost like a chant. The team brought in experts in audio analysis, hoping to make sense of the ghostly sounds. But even after hours of filtering and enhancement, the recordings offered no clear answers, only fragments of words and unsettling tones. Meanwhile, the local community stirred with renewed fear. Stories of Olivia's disappearance were no longer forgotten whispers. They were waking nightmares. Campers reported hearing strange noises near the restricted zone, soft footsteps, distant humming, and sometimes inexplicable silences that swallowed the sounds of nature. One park visitor claimed to have seen a shadowy figure watching from the tree line, motionless, before vanishing into thin air. Carl's own nights became restless. He found himself drawn back to the journal, rereading Thomas Avery's words and wondering if he had underestimated the presence lurking in the forest. Late one evening, alone in his cabin near the park's edge, Carl heard a faint tapping on his window. He froze. The tapping came again, soft, deliberate. Summoning courage, he pulled back the curtain. Nothing but the dark forest stared back. The tapping stopped. Carl turned away, heart pounding. Suddenly, a low voice echoed behind him, whispering, "Too much noise." He spun around. No one there. Was it a hallucination, a warning, or something far worse? Determined to understand, Carl planned one final expedition to the cabin. this time alone and prepared to confront whatever waited. But deep in Yosemite's shadows, the line between watcher and watched was thinning, and something ancient was stirring, ready to listen once more. Carl Jensen's final journey into the Forbidden Zone was heavy with dread and determination. Armed with night vision cameras, recording devices, and survival gear, he ventured alone into the depths of Yosemite's darkest woods, toward the cabin that held so many unanswered questions. The forest was unnervingly silent, the usual chorus of birds and insects absent, as if the entire wilderness were holding its breath. The shadows grew long and twisted, swallowing his flashlight beam. Reaching the cabin just before dusk, Carl noticed subtle changes, fresh footprints leading toward the woods, unlike any he'd seen before. They didn't match any human or animal print. The prints were odd, flat, elongated, and unnerving. Inside, the cabin seemed untouched since his last visit, but an old trapdoor behind a dusty cupboard caught his attention. He pried it open, revealing a narrow, dark tunnel leading underground. With heart pounding, Carl descended into the cold, cramped passage, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The tunnel opened into a small, hidden chamber. Its walls were covered in strange symbols, scratches and carvings that seemed ancient and alive. In the center lay remnants of makeshift bedding, empty cans, and a small broken radio. On a crude wooden table he found more pages, notes and sketches likely from Thomas Avery, detailing encounters with a creature not bound by normal laws. According to the writings, the entity was not a physical beast, but a shadow, a presence that fed on noise and fear. It could not move in darkness or silence, but it listened and struck when disturbed. The final sketch showed a figure, part human, part shadow, with eyes that glowed faintly like embers. Suddenly, Carl's radio crackled, and a voice whispered through static, "Too much noise." He froze, flashlight trembling in his grip. A sudden chill filled the chamber, and the shadows around him seemed to pulse. Realizing the danger, Carl raced back through the tunnel, emerging into the cold night air. He looked back once. In the forest's edge, a dark shape lingered, still, watching, listening. Carl knew then that Olivia Cheng hadn't vanished by accident. She, like Thomas Avery, had encountered something beyond understanding, something ancient and patient. The footprints that stopped, the silence that followed, it was the entity's way of hunting. As dawn broke over Yosemite, Carl made a vow to protect this secret, to warn others, and to keep the forest's darkest presence at bay. But deep in the shadows, the watcher remained, listening, waiting. In the weeks following his harrowing discovery, Carl Jensen became a changed man. The weight of the secret pressed on him relentlessly. He knew the truth about what had taken Olivia Cheng and Thomas Avery, an ancient, shadowy presence that thrived in silence and darkness, hunting those who disturbed the fragile balance of the wilderness. Carl met with park officials in private, urging them to tighten restrictions around the Forbidden Zone. They hesitated, worried about public panic. But he insisted the forest was no place for curiosity or carelessness. Olivia's family was informed of the new findings, though much was left unsaid. The words to describe what really happened simply didn't exist. Her parents grieved anew, torn between relief at knowing and horror at the truth. The cabin was sealed once more with additional warnings and patrols to keep visitors away. Rangers who dared approach reported the same eerie sensations: whispers carried by the wind, footsteps in the dark, and the oppressive feeling of eyes watching from unseen places. Carl often found himself standing at the edge of the woods, gazing into the shadows where the sun couldn't reach. He thought of Olivia, her bright spirit lost to the forest's hunger, and Thomas trapped in his silent fight for survival. The journal remained locked away, a relic of fear and mystery. Yet despite every precaution, the forest held its secrets close. Visitors would sometimes tell of strange sounds in the night, of fleeting shadows just beyond the firelight. Some would disappear, others would never speak of what they saw. And deep beneath the ancient trees, the watcher continued its endless vigil. It did not walk, it did not run, but it always listened. The wilderness of Yosemite was vast and beautiful, but it was also a place of darkness and silence, where shadows never sleep, and where some secrets are better left undisturbed.